hello, everybody. It's me, Rashi, and we are talking. Oh, look at this, my drawer. I was like, my desk is all clear, but then my drawer is wide open. Anyway, you know how it goes. Parents, well, we're talking about something that many parents have actually reached out to me about to use as a parent-to-parent topic, which is because of the war, Israel and Hamas. You might not be very familiar with what's going on, but your kids are probably exposed to the just awful, awful, horrendous videos that are being recorded, that are being shared on social media. I mean, I don't even know how. I watched one video and now I have like all these videos on my feed. I don't know how these algorithms work. I'm pretty sure that they're listening to me right now. I mean, I don't really know the ins and outs of all of that, but I've talked a lot about it and it's just on my feed. And there's a lot of kids, and we're talking about kids that have cell phones that have seen this on their social media, whether it be TikTok, all over TikTok, by the way. And also everyone's recording all of this like in the hospitals, which is like a whole nother topic to talk about anyways. But when it comes to our children and even us, like dealing with what we're seeing on the news, me being in the media, what I see on the news, a lot of times we don't put everything out there because it's just too hard to watch. But it's just like all this visceral trauma too while you're talking about it. And there's a lot of journalists that have talked about that as well. You as a parent might have visceral trauma, which is basically, well, I have a psychotherapist here with us too, so she can explain about that. I'm just Rashi. You know what I mean? All right. Well, we have two very special guests. We have Jennifer Pinkerton. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And she is a psychotherapist, and our good friend Rania, CEO of Crime Stoppers. So I'm so glad that we're all three talking about this together. Rania, first, I'm going to ask you, what kind of feedback are you getting from parents when it comes to this type of content reaching their kids?
Yeah, and it's a concern. And it's interesting, Rashi, you talked about kids having access through their phones. I just want to add a note. If you're in a house where your child doesn't have a phone, that doesn't mean that they don't have access, because they have access through their iPads, but they also have access through friends' devices. And it only takes about 5 minutes on a gadget to see something really violent. But parents are worried because for the most part, young kids are on some type of technology 4 to 6 hours a day. Older teens are on at least 9 hours a day. It sounds like a lot of time, but it's not. And they're being exposed to pictures, videos, and editorialized content depicting violence, terror, horror, fear, and trauma. And they are internalizing this. They don't understand the landscape. They don't understand the narrative. They don't understand what this means for them and their safety, what it means for stability versus instability. They don't know what to make of this content. And they have questions, and it creates some concerns, and parents are feeling it. So for the most part, parents want to know, what do we do? What do we do? And that's what we look at Crime Stoppers. What are the tools you can use, and how can you help navigate these difficult times?
And I was going to ask you, when it comes to the ask from a lot of leaders, I was reading an article on CNN that schools in Israel, UK, US, they're advising parents to just delete their children's social media apps over concerns that they have that Hamas militants will be broadcasting disturbing videos of hostages who have been seized in recent days. So, it's something that some parents are thinking about. The Tel Aviv Schools Parent Association says that it expects videos of hostages to surface on social media. And I know we had talked about earlier how deleting social media apps might not be the way to go. But when you kind of see these warnings, how do you, as a parent, decipher what to do at that point?
Well, one, I wish the ask was that, TikToks and Instagrams and Twitters or X would not create a caveat for this type of content to be shown. That's what I really wish. But here's what we have to do. It's time to have a conversation with our children. What's going on? What do we do about the content that's being fed to us? What questions do they have? How does it really relate to your life? And there will be kids that say, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not worried about it. But no, you are worried about it, because we know even after 9/11, there was a sense of secondary trauma, or this secondary sense of terrorism, where the images live on, and you internalize them and start to feel this sense of fear wherever you go. So you want to have age appropriate, honest conversations, giving children an outlet to express their feelings, a tool to shift away from content. Okay, look, I know what's going on. I don't need to see more of this. If I have questions, I can go to my parents or my grandparents and have an honest conversation. And you know what? We have to model that behavior. We've got to put our phones down ourselves, maybe turn the content off when our kids come into the room, or decide that we'll designate time to sit and look at it together if the kids are really curious. The heart of this is giving kids an understanding, giving them a sense of control, not saying we're going to take everything away or we don't want you to look at it because we said so, because that doesn't do anything. They're just going to look at it unsupervised, and giving them a way to deal with the feelings that they have. And these are things all of us, we can actually do this. Each of us can do this, and we can start tonight.
Definitely. And that's great advice there. I'm going to bring in Jennifer. First off, I want to let you know that she is a psychotherapist. I encourage you to go to her website, where she has a lot more information. She has a whole staff. I'm learning more about her as well, other than the fact that she looks beautiful for a mom of 4 and also getting her PhD. It's just all this stuff happening. And it's really very motivational. I'm sure Rania would agree too. Rania is also very, very motivational to me too. So I'm just so happy to be talking with you guys here. So Jennifer, tell me about what kind of advice you've been giving parents, because I'm going to also ask you about the advice you would give parents themselves, because this sucks, like all of it. Like, it's just, you don't even know how to fathom all. I mean, this is just unimaginable what you're seeing.
We're dealing with a huge problem, and I really think it centers around this overexposure. It's the overexposure where kids, teens, even young adults are inundated with the information and the images. And what happens with that being inundated is that they're become desensitized. We have now normalized things, and social media has brought the war so much closer and has normalized it in a way that graphic images, violent content, things like that, children are not able to process that on their own independently. And just as Rania was discussing, I couldn't agree more with the statements that she had on this. It does require that sense of connection that you have to have with your children to address that. And even for your kids that are teens or even in college, to create this environment where you can discuss it, so that they don't leave seeing these images and have them be so normalized and become numb to it, where there is no impact anymore, because we want our children to have an impact to things that we don't, the violence and the graphic nature of it, it's too much. So you have to remember that there is this quest for emotional safety with kids, especially the younger they are. They're looking for that, and they're going to look to their parents, as Rania mentioned as well, to give them that. And so it's up for the parents to lead, and you have to lead by example with communication. You have to be able to set that time and designate to look for those big feelings and to validate the big feelings, to recognize, how are you feeling? And that's the main focus I give to parents, is to use that time with your child, that one-on-one connection, to state, how is this making you feel when you see this? Do you have questions about it? Can we discuss it? This must bring up something for you. I wonder if that's a struggle for you. Have you heard friends talk about it? What do those friends say? What other environments or atmosphere do you have at school on this? And to really create a sense of emotional safety, that it's safe to talk to mom, it's safe to talk to dad, or it's safe to talk to whoever your primary caregivers are. I think that's crucial. Now, when the kids get a little bit older and they're, middle school and they're in high school, it becomes more difficult, because they're in this space where they're setting their own, they're testing their independent actions and their growth, and they're trying to get an idea of who they are and have that independent thought. And while we encourage independent thought and we want them to trust their instincts, we still want to be the safety net for them. We want to be able to say, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I'd like to know how you're feeling. I would like to understand what you think about what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really good advice there. Now, I would ask for parents themselves, like, or adults in general. I would say, I have, and I'll bring Rania in too. I've muted a lot of people on social media, or even just unfriended them, because it's like this other version of them that I didn't know about, and they're posting these things, and it's like, I don't want to continue. I'm not trying to turn a blind eye to it. I just don't want to continuously be exposed to all this stuff all the time. And there's this almost guilt factor that people have put as well. And I don't know if you've seen it too as an adult, that, you're not taking part in the
Yes.
solution, or if you're not able to watch this, then you're not doing this. And it's like, it messes with your mind, because you have a good heart. Like, I had, and I'll just put this out there. There's a Jewish friend of mine that was raising money for some children in Israel. And I posted about that just because she's doing something good local. And then I got all this like hate from people that like follow me. Like, well, what about the Palestinians? And I was like, I posted about them too. It's like, you can't win. And I just feel like parents are also struggling with this too. And I'd love to hear, Rania and Jennifer, your take on it.
I think I just have to, this is such a huge issue, because we are living in a time where we are forced into an us versus them culture for everything, literally everything. You can't say, I feel so sad about the Palestinian kids who've died, without somebody saying, well, what about the Jewish? Well, I'm dying over all of it, all of it. And we've lost the ability to have generalized humanity, and to say 10% is right here, 90% is wrong there, 50% is wrong here, and 50% is wrong there. We've lost the art of that even type of conversation. And so here, when it comes to kids, one of the things that has disturbed me the most, beyond filming violent content, beyond the fact that kids are going to consume violent content, it is the duets. It is the people who will show that violent content and then give their super divided, thank God those animals died opinions, and then have people cheer them on for their hatred and the divisiveness and the fact that they're taking a stand. That scares me even more than the people who are in real-time war in our film. Like, okay, that's something we should be looking at, and we are. But the people who take that content and repurpose it to force hatred and get you to agree with them, I really get concerned when kids consume that and start to form opinions based on what those people are saying. We're finding 77% of kids are forming political opinions based on what they're seeing online. That's scary.
And even like locally at these protests, you have the little kids saying what the parents believe, obviously. So it's, it's crazy all over. And it's also, I was talking at a school, and one of the teenagers, they asked their teacher, because the teacher told me, why would someone, because, in America, you're not allowed to be inside hospitals and film people and all of that stuff. But why are people filming all this sad stuff? This dad finding out his kid has died, this kid in his dad's arm, and I didn't have, I don't even know what to say to that. And it's like, you want to have an honest conversation, but I don't even know the answer. And it's like, what do you even say to the child at that point, or teenager? So what is kind of your advice, Jennifer?
Well, I think, you're touching on that part, and Rania did as well, is that it's not just the war. It's actually the impact of people's opinions in the very divisive and this polarized world that we live in. And children and teens, especially teens, really adopt some of that because they want to fit in. It's now normalized. They want to be accepted. And if these people over here believe that, then maybe I'm going to believe that. And there's no recognition or even understanding that so much of the information on these meta platforms and social media is not even accurate. It's geared towards whoever the person that's posting it, what their thoughts are. And so it doesn't give a whole picture, and it doesn't allow people to understand a whole picture. And we want to be able to encourage kids, teens alike, even young adults, we want people to have their independent thought. We want people to also operate from a place of compassion and recognize that if we're pressured to be divisive, we're pressured to make this decision based on something they see on social media only, that's not a good place where we want to be in. And we want to teach a different type of lesson with that. We also have to recognize the amount of trauma that comes from that. Trauma is not just about the experience you could personally experience. It's the effect of the whole experience around that. And that's carried on. And there can truly be a lot of really negative impact from this: depression, anxiety, PTSD, so many things that can be really impactful in such a negative way for kids and teens and young adults who are not understanding and don't have the capacity yet emotionally, the emotional maturity to be able to farm through this and to be able to endure the onslaught of this constant level of overexposure.
And would you say that, I've done stories like this before when the war in Ukraine, or with the Taliban when they took over, these kind of tragic events, school shootings and all that. And it's always advised be part of the solution. Do you, what are the ramifications, or what are your thoughts on taking your children to protests?
Well, the problem is with that is that there's so much hatred. There's so much hatred out there. And for a child especially to be able to process that hatred, that's not something they're emotionally, neurologically capable of yet at that age. And you have to look at what is age appropriate, number one. Number two, there is this concept of what happens with negative crowd energy. When there is this incited sense of rage and urgency that happens, that can be very scary for a child. It can feel very out of control. And so, I think that parents have to use good judgment to think of what is age appropriate. I think parents have to have the important conversations with their children. Before they would think about doing that, they need to be certain that they have that connection, that they're talking about these heavy issues, that they're being able to address any concerns or fears, particularly that their child has. Just saying, come along, this is what we believe as a family, is not doing that. There has to be the time at home that's going to address these things beforehand and make certain your child is not presenting with concerns or problems with depression or really anxiety over the fear of what's to come. And the fear of the unknown is also very scary. And the world is very unknown right now.
Definitely. Ronnie, did you want to say something?
No, I agree. And I think parents have to strike a balance. We want to raise kids who are socially conscious and aware and care about causes. But on the flip side, kids have to be kids. And not all kids need to stand up and protest and take on global issues. We can teach them about it at home and raise them to care and take small chunks in their own way. But kids are not designed to take on these massive issues. They're just not. And I personally think, pulling them into it with placing the burden on their shoulders is really, really unfair and ultimately harmful.
It can be almost selfish, when you think about it. Because we're not thinking about the lens of how this impacts your child. These parents might be very driven by passion and very driven by what's important to them. And while that matters, absolutely, we have to recognize that we have to be a responsible parent and really look at age appropriate impacts and recognize your particular child. We have to parent for our particular child, how they're internalizing things, if any, and how this is affecting them, if any. And really understanding what their worldview is like, because it's hard to believe that someone 5 years old can have a worldview, but they absolutely do. 100%. Social media took care of that for us. They're giving them that worldview. And so we need to make certain that worldview is all encompassing in a way that really is driving compassion. It really isn't driving the age appropriateness. And I can't emphasize that enough.
And I would argue that now more than ever, and my parents that are older say the same thing. Like, we have to be so much more involved in our child's life than they had to, because of just the world that we're living in. So I want to thank you both for being here and talking about this important topic. I also want to just give a shout out to Rania and the book that's on Amazon. If you haven't gotten it yet, please do. It's a great book. And it really has been highly rated. And also just in this social media world, it's like, how do you navigate? And Oprah just recently was asked, why do you think there's so much divide, so much hatred in the world right now? She was saying, I think a big part of it is the social media. And so it's kind of like, how do we navigate through all of that? Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all got some good information on this very important topic that we'll continue to discuss throughout. And if you have any ideas, please list them below in the comment section.